The rain was merciless that night, hammering against the windows of the elegant restaurant where Ethan Cole sat alone at a corner table, sipping his untouched glass of wine. To the world, he was the image of success, a billionaire CEO of coal industries, a man who built empires from ashes and turned everything he touched into gold. But beneath that perfectly tailored suit and icy stare was a man running from the one thing he could never buy: peace. Across the street, under the dim glow of a broken streetlight, a man in a soaked jacket knelt beside his little girl, trying to shelter her from the storm with a piece of cardboard. The restaurant's glass reflected both worlds, opulence on one side, desperation on the other, and fate, for reasons unknown to Ethan, decided that tonight, those worlds would collide. Ethan was supposed to meet a client that evening, another investor, another deal, another opportunity to add a few more zeros to his fortune. But as he watched the father outside struggle to keep his daughter warm, something in his chest stirred. He tried to ignore it, he always did. His life was built on logic, not empathy. He had convinced himself long ago that emotions were a distraction, a liability in the world of power and profit. But then he saw the little girl look up at her father with the kind of innocent trust that only a child could give and whisper something he couldn't hear. The man smiled weakly, brushing her hair from her face, and Ethan felt a pang so sharp it startled him. For the first time in years, he felt human. Outside, Jake Turner tightened his arms around his daughter, Lily. They had been living out of his car for weeks now, ever since he lost his job at the construction company that downsized without warning. His wife had passed away 2 years earlier, and he'd done everything he could to keep life normal for Lily, but tonight, he had run out of both money and hope. "It's okay, Daddy," Lily said softly, her voice trembling from the cold, "we can leave. We don't need to eat here." Jake's eyes stung. He had brought her near the restaurant not to eat, but just to let her see the lights, to remind her that the world still had beauty. He forced a smile and said, "Maybe tomorrow, sweetheart." But the words tasted bitter in his mouth, like broken promises. From his table, Ethan couldn't stop staring. He motioned for the waiter. "That man outside," he said, pointing discreetly, "bring them in. Tell him dinner's on the house." The waiter hesitated. The soaked man outside didn't exactly fit in among the polished marble and crystal chandeliers. But one look at Ethan's expression and he obeyed. Moments later, Jake entered hesitantly, clutching Lily's small hand, both dripping wet and shivering. The restaurant fell silent. Wealthy patrons glanced up, their faces twisted in mild disgust. Ethan felt their judgment like daggers, but he stood and waved the pair over. "Sit," he said simply. Jake stammered, "Sir, we can't afford." "I didn't ask if you could afford it," Ethan interrupted, his tone softer than he intended. "I said sit." Lily's eyes widened at the sight of the white tablecloth, the candles, the plates so clean they looked like glass. When the waiter placed a bowl of warm soup before her, she smiled so brightly that Ethan's heart nearly broke. He didn't realize until that moment how long it had been since he'd seen a smile that pure. As they ate, Ethan watched silently. Jake tried to maintain dignity, thanking every staff member who passed by, apologizing for the puddle forming under their table. It was clear he wasn't used to charity. Pride and humility wrestled in his posture. "You remind me of someone I used to know," Ethan said suddenly. Jake looked up. "My father," Ethan continued, "he worked 3 jobs to put food on our table. I didn't understand him then. I thought money was the only thing that mattered. I built this empire," he gestured vaguely around, "to prove I'd never be poor again. But somehow, I became poorer than ever." Jake didn't know what to say. For a moment, they just listened to the rain. Then Lily spoke, "Thank you, mister. This is the best soup ever." Ethan smiled faintly. "You're very welcome, Lily." She giggled. "How do you know my name?" He pointed to the name sewn on her faded backpack. "Ah," she said proudly, "Daddy said names are important. They tell people you matter." Ethan froze. "They tell people you matter." The words pierced through years of emptiness like sunlight breaking through clouds. For the first time in decades, Ethan didn't see numbers, assets, or deals, he saw people. He saw life. When the meal ended, Jake insisted on shaking Ethan's hand. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You already did," Ethan replied, glancing at Lily. "You reminded me what matters." He thought that would be the end of it, one act of kindness to soothe a guilty conscience. But as they turned to leave, Lily waved. "It's okay, Daddy," she said softly, "we can leave now." And somehow, those simple words cracked something open in Ethan's soul. "It's okay, Daddy. We can leave." She wasn't clinging to what she'd been given, she was content. Grateful. Ethan, a man who had everything, suddenly felt like he had nothing compared to that kind of peace. Hours later, back in his penthouse overlooking the city, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept replaying that moment, the child's innocent voice, the father's quiet strength, the warmth in their eyes despite everything they'd lost. He opened his laptop out of habit, checking stock reports, contracts, investments. But for the first time, the numbers blurred. He closed the screen. He thought of his own daughter, Emily, a name he hadn't spoken aloud in years. After his divorce, their relationship had fractured. She'd told him once, "You care more about your company than me." He hadn't denied it. But tonight, hearing Lily's words, he realized how deeply he'd failed. Somewhere along the way, he had traded love for legacy, family for fortune. The next morning, Ethan made a decision that shocked his entire board. "We're changing the company mission," he announced. "From now on, 10% of all profits will go to building housing and job programs for struggling families." His executives exchanged alarmed glances. "Sir, that's millions of dollars." "Yes," Ethan said quietly, "and maybe millions of second chances." They tried to argue, but he didn't listen. That same afternoon, Ethan found Jake and Lily again, at a shelter this time. Jake was helping repair a broken heater. "You're handy," Ethan said, approaching with a smile. Jake turned, startled. "Mr. Cole." Ethan extended a hand. "Call me Ethan. I've got a proposition." 2 weeks later, Jake stood in a crisp uniform at the entrance of the Cole Foundation's first community center, as its new operations supervisor. Lily sat in a corner, coloring with other kids, her laughter filling the air. Ethan watched them from a distance, feeling something bloom in his chest, a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in years. He began visiting the center often, not as a CEO, but as a man learning to care again. He read bedtime stories to the children, funded school supplies, and built relationships that no balance sheet could measure. Months passed. One evening, Ethan found himself sitting beside Lily as she drew a picture. "What's that?" he asked. She grinned. "It's you, me, and Daddy. You're smiling. You don't smile much, do you?" Ethan laughed, the sound surprising even himself. "No," he said softly, "but I'm learning." She handed him the drawing. "You can keep it, so you don't forget us." Ethan felt tears sting his eyes. "I won't forget," he promised. That night, he called his daughter Emily. For the first time in years, he didn't talk about work or money. He just said, "I miss you. I'm sorry." There was silence on the line, and then, softly, she whispered, "I miss you too, Dad." The next morning, she came to see him. When she arrived, Ethan was at the community center, helping serve breakfast. Emily stood in the doorway, watching as her father laughed with a group of kids, a little girl tugging at his sleeve. She smiled through tears. Later, she hugged him tightly and said, "You've changed." Ethan smiled. "A little girl taught me how." Years later, people would talk about Ethan Cole's transformation, how one rainy night turned the coldest man in the city into its warmest heart. They'd call it philanthropy, redemption, corporate responsibility. But for Ethan, it was simpler. It was about a little girl who taught him that love isn't about what you give, it's about what you see. It's seeing the hungry and feeding them, seeing the broken and helping them stand, seeing the lost and reminding them they matter. And every year, on the anniversary of that stormy night, Ethan would take Lily and Jake to dinner, same restaurant, same table. When the check came, he'd smile and say, "This one's on me, forever." Lily, now older but still full of light, would grin and reply with the same words that started it all. "It's okay, Daddy. We can leave." And every time, Ethan's heart would whisper back, "No, little one. Because of you, we finally arrived."